Hello and welcome to episode 114 of The Game Pit. I'm Sean and here's Ronan.
Hello everyone, you're very welcome back into The Game Pit. Today, Sean, we're going back to the basics, to our bread and butter, and it is a picking over the bones episode.
It is, Ronan, it is, and you missed out on the last one, didn't you?
It was yourself and Natalie. You found an able replacement, but don't worry, I soon found a shallow grave for her. I'm not getting replaced by anyone. That was my only option.
No matter what the public demand.
That's right. Bring back Natalie, bring back Eleanor. No, you'll be stuck with us. It's fine. Just do with our subpar performances, like everyone else does.
I'll tell you what, the additional 2 female members are coming, just like our father podcast, The Dice Tower.
We're referring to them as our father podcast, aren't we? Well, you're happy with this phrasing? I'm going to need a minute here. Can you just fill some time?
The senior podcast.
I don't know which is worse. Okay. I think you mean that Natalie and Eleanor will probably be on as much as we can feature them.
Something like that.
Okay.
Why would I make a concise point when I can amble on and witter?
It's tradition.
It is tradition.
You've lost me. And I've got the first game up. You've lost me completely. You should probably do our ND of intro thing and I can try and gather my thoughts.
Okay, well, Ronan tries to work his way around that bombshell. We are, of course, proud members of the Dice Tower Network. Go there.
Our father.
We are, of course, proud members of the Dice Tower Network, if you wish to go there. And to the Dice Tower itself for gaming goodness galore. We are on Podbean, Stitcher, iTunes, and Spotify, if you wish to download our episodes. And of course we do have our YouTube channel where we have our pit stop overview videos.
So we're going to kick off with our first review of this episode, and this is for Carthago, a 2017 release for 2 to 4 players, taking around 60 minutes, maybe slightly over. This is published by Iron Games, Games Up and Capstone Games. Designed by Bernd Eisenstein, the designer of Peloponnese, Alia Iacta Est, Pax and Panthelos, and helped this time by Ralph Beinert, who doesn't have any other designs as far as I know. In Carthago, each player is a merchant in Carthage, and over 3 decades they're looking to trade with or capture foreign ships, and also to get prestigious places in the local guild and to get achievements, and they only have 15 turns in which to do this. Each player starts with an identical deck of 7 action cards, and on each of your turns you're going to choose one of the 5 different actions in the game. And to do so, you move a dauber on a circular action selection board, but there's no rondo or anything like that, there's no movement points or anything, you just choose one of the 5 to go to, there's no restrictions in terms of that. So those 5 actions are, you can go to the market and trade cards and get trade cards. Now trade cards have got different things on them. They give you a certain type of goods, they give you a certain action they can support, and they give you a value in money, and they will be used during the other actions in the game. Now, why might you want more action cards when you already have a deck of 7 which have all the 5 actions on there? Because I said you're on that circular action selection ring. If you go to a space that has 1 or more other players' daubers on there, you have to spend supplementary cards, adding them to the card you played already in order to take that particular action. Now, why do you want goods on these trade cards? That's because you can go and trade with ships, and there's 2 different ways of doing this. And in fact, there's 2 separate actions. One of them allows you to put one of your discs, which represents all your actions basically, into the dock area. There are 5 slots for different ships to be there. There will be 5 ships lined up, and you're just reserving one of the berths and saying, I wish to trade there at some point. The second action, which is related to that, is to go to the warship dock. There's only 2 spaces. There is a possibility in the game to get into a 3rd space. And there you're saying, I am looking to send out a warship, and it's going to be taking a random trader, hopefully, if it's strong enough to do so. Now, why are you going there? There is the 4th action in the game, and that is to trade with those ships. The berth in the dock in which you have your dauber, there will be a ship next to it and it will want a particular trade good. And if you have a trade good of that type in your hand, you can hand it in, and that's going to give you some money according to the value of the ship. You turn trade cards over from the top of the deck until you get at least that value money. It's also going to give you the ship itself, which is going to give you an action in the game, and at any point on one of your turns you can flip over the ship, and they give you all sorts of things which bend the rules in all different sorts of ways and give you a slight edge in which you're trying to do. Now, in that trade, as well as doing your dock trade, you can also send out your warship that I was discussing. Now, you send it out, and if it's strong enough to attack the random merchant you draw from the top of the deck, and they all have a strength on them on these ships, then you get to take that ship, you get the money as well, but you get to keep it face down. The action's not available to you, or you can flip it by taking a market action. Also, when you send out a warship, you get to place one of your discs into the guild, and that's a key part of the scoring. There are various places within the guild there. It comes in a grid. The number of places available depends upon the number of players, and they all require a certain amount of money from 6 to 12, and that's why you want these trade cards with money on them, to allow you to pay to be in the guild. Now, how are you going to defeat these ships? Well, everyone starts with a strength of 1 with their warships, but there are 3 areas within your home which you can improve, and that's the 5th and final action. When you choose that on the action selector, you can choose to either improve the strength of your warships, you can choose to take more discs into your pool, because you have a very limited pool, and when you wish to take a place into the guild, you must place one of your discs, and you might run out of them and not be able to take any more actions. Also, you can do achievements during the course of the game, and you do that by doing the warships. By claiming them, that's also going to suck up part of your disc supply. Now, the achievements are going to give you points at the end of the game for different things. They come in 3 decades, 2 for each decade, and you don't usually get access to ones from previous decades. And they're going to pay out points at the end for having stuff like having traded with lots of different ships, or traded with lots of the same type of ship, or having lots of money, or having been on achievements, or for the shape of spaces you've covered in the guild area. And that's the third thing you can get from your house, is you can get extra virtual guild members. Now, why are we getting these guild members? Because at the end of the game, there's only 2 things that are going to score you points: the number of ships you've been able to trade with or conquer, multiplied by the number of members you have in the guild at all, and also any points you've got from those achievements. They'll change from game to game, and it will be for achieving obviously certain things during the game. And the player who scores the most points is going then to have won Carthago. Sean, it's a small-ish box game. You only get 15 turns in it. It takes more than 60 minutes to play. So is it worth it?
So you mentioned, Ronan, that it is a small-ish box game. One thing I want to get onto first, obviously I like to talk about the look and the design of the game. What drew this one to you? Because you're the one that brought it into the pit. You're the one that brought it down to us and sort of said, like, I want everyone to play this because you'd played it previously. What drew you in? Because it doesn't really have a massive table presence. The looks of the game don't really draw you in, although I do quite like that sort of the style of the game, because it's reminiscent of the sort of Carthage style of art. So what brought you to it?
Well, I'll address both your points there. Firstly, the look of it, I think it looks familiar, as in, okay, all the iconography is very clear. You know where you're going. It's got quite a Euro look to it, but I don't think it looks dull. It doesn't edge over into that at all. I think the trade cards are quite nice and the ship cards are quite nice. What drew me in, as your second point, is this is an adaptation of Porto Carthago, which was a very small release from Iron Games. I don't think it did that well. And from 2010 Essen, which had a really interesting... It had similar actions to it, but you had a group of dobbers. I think, I'm trying to go back to memory, you had about 15 of them, and they counted as everything. They counted as your action selectors, they counted as your income, they counted as your military presence, and the game was very much about managing how many dobbers you have at the end of a round, because that's going to be your income. Without money, you can't do anything. But without having them out on the board in certain places, like they would dictate how strong your warships were, how many dobbers have you got in there, but then you're sacrificing other areas to have strong warships. And I really like the system. It didn't tie together perfectly, but it was a really good game that had a very small release. So when I heard that they'd sort of adapted that system, and I think a lot of the adaptation was Ralph Beinart, when they adapted the system, I was immediately onto it. And I was hopeful, because I was very fond of the father game, since we're using that phrase in this episode. And that's why I sort of became a little bit evangelical about the game without even having played it.
Fine, cool. So we've talked about it as a small box game. It doesn't take up a lot of space on the table. But what I quickly found, Ronan, is that in terms of things to do, you get a lot of bang for your buck, as the term goes. There are loads of options in this, and there's just little tiny options that all make a lot of sense. Really easy game to teach, more than the sum of its parts, Ronan.
Yeah, I think in terms, you said it was easy to teach. I think that's because the rules are really smooth. There's no stumbling blocks, there's no little exceptions, there's no, oh, you can do that, but only if you've got that in your hand, or you can do this, but you have to have done 3 things first beforehand. You can almost always take any of the 5 actions, but the tightness comes from the fact you only have 15 actions in the whole game. So I think that's what adds together that tightness, and the fact that they haven't tried to make it too sprawling and too long and too epic. There's another game I'm going to talk about that in our next episode that's coming up, but they haven't tried to hang too much on it. Makes each of those small decisions feel weighty, Sean.
Yes, it certainly does. And yeah, that feeling that you always want to do more, that's a good thing in games.
It is, and a part of that also, I think, is that there is interaction in the game, so you can never perfectly plan ahead. And sometimes that feeling that you want to do more is because you have to have a flexible approach, because there's just enough interaction with, like on the action selection wheel, if 1 or 2 doubles are in the place you need to go and you haven't got those cards in your hand, it can force you to spend an extra action just stalling, and they all feel like, oh, do I want to spend another one? Now, you can kind of get blocked out in the docks more if someone trades or doesn't trade, because you take a berth, and when someone trades, all the ships that were further out move along. So you might say, okay, I'm going to take the second spot, Sean's in first spot, because he's going to trade, and the ships will slide along, and then the ship that I really want's there. And then Sean spends 4 of the 15 actions not trading. And you're like, oh, why aren't you trading? But then there's other things you can do, like getting a ship early, which allows you to trade in any other good when you're trading with a ship, so that gives you flexibility. But is that ship exactly the one you want, or do you have to plan to get to it? And like I say, they all interlock with each other, but what other players are doing interlock with what you're doing as well. And that can lead to that feeling of each one.
Yeah, the first time I played this one, Ronan, I felt like I spotted a little bit of a flaw in that it was too easy to block the dock, and so to stop people getting, because you could just sit multiple of your counters in there. And then the next time I played it, I realised actually it's not that easy, because you've actually got to have the counters to be able to do that in the first place. So you've got to do a lot of other things to get to that point, and by that stage obviously other people will start infiltrating into that dock. So I kind of answered my own point there, but I think first time playing it I wasn't as convinced as I was in subsequent plays.
It was a grower.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it can be a bit of a hard sell in terms of that, in that when you initially get it out and show it to people, they kind of go, what? I've only got 15 things to do. And because it's got that early 2000s-ish look to it, and it's kind of browny, and people haven't heard of it, it is quite a hard sell. But people have to give it a chance because of the smooth teaching. And to me, and this is the question I'm going to put to you, it's the thematic feeling of the game. And I don't mean obviously like adventure and rolling dice. I mean, do you actually feel like you're wheeling, dealing, taking opportunities that come at you, like on that action wheel, nipping in and out? Was that what started to breed for you as you played it more?
Not really, no. I don't think I ever got that. I didn't ever feel that in itself. I know the cards are quite thematic in the way they look and stuff, but I never actually felt like I was within the game. I was the person that was doing these things. It was almost like quite an abstract strategy game where I was thinking, what is my best move? What's most advantageous to me? And one thing I will touch on, Ronan, is the thing I haven't been able to shake off that is not a flaw in the game, but there's an almost must-do, and that is to build up your attack value so you can attack those ships when they're randomly turned over. Now, I think that's almost a must, and you have to do that quite early, because what you don't want to do is have those ships turn over and not be able to get them onto your tableau. So I felt like that was almost a no-brainer.
I think it's one of two main strategies you can do. The thing with building up the strength, and this is why I like the way the house works, because there's the 3 different areas, and you said it there. Do you want to get loads of discs out? Okay, that's one of the columns you can go down, because for finishing a column you get a virtual guild member, which can be worth lots of points to you at the end of the game. If you go down strengthening your warship early, you're not getting extra discs out, so they can become tight, and also you're not claiming the virtual guild members. So is it worth the payoff, because you're getting another ship which will multiply your guild members, but you've got fewer guild members? And that's something that you have to balance between. And if you take both those routes, then you're not getting the extra discs. You'll have fewer discs to then put onto the achievements, and you're giving up that. And that's kind of the fine balance. But having said that, I can only really see 2 main paths. So one of my concerns about this may be variety between plays. It's interactive, but there's not massive amounts of different strategies you can explore.
So, Ronan, I think I'm ready to sum up on this one. I think it's a very clever game. I like the multi-use cards. They use them in lots of different ways. As I said right at the top, it doesn't have a massive presence, but what you do is it draws you into this conundrum, and you're trying to solve this conundrum, and you're trying to, as Rona said, there's these 2-3 paths, and you're trying to balance them all, and you want to do them all, and you can't do them all, and it's a very, very good problem to have in a game. For such a small price point and such a small footprint, I think, I'm going to use the phrase again, Ronan, you're getting a hell of a lot of bang for your buck in this one, and I'm personally glad that you brought this one to my attention.
Well, I'd like to thank you for thanking me. That's beautiful. It fits its niche. It's not world-changing. It's not the greatest game I've ever played, but it's definitely one of the better 60-minute, smaller games that I've played in the last year or two. You have to think on your feet. You have to adapt, but all in moderate measures. You can't throw away what you've been planning to do. You have to adapt to what trade cards you get when you're drawing and when you've traded to say, okay, that gives me strength in that action, that's good. Or it hasn't given me strength in that action. I have to wait for that to be available. So I need 2 or 3 different routes I can go down for the next 1 or 2 actions. And that all keeps me, you have to be flexible, but I still have to have an overall plan. And I like it. It's really smooth to teach. It's smooth to play. And I think it deserves a big audience. Certainly more than its father game got. And that is our review of Carthago. Sean, you are going to lead us onwards down the river.
It's another ancient civilization, Ronan. We're going into ancient Egypt, and this is Sailing Toward Osiris. It's the 2018 release from Daily Magic Games, designed by W. David Mackenzie, who, interestingly enough, owns Clever Mojo Games, and it plays 2 to 4 players. So, theming behind Sailing Towards Osiris is the pharaoh is dead, and his funeral barge is sailing down the Nile to eventually stand before the judgment of Osiris himself or herself. As the pharaoh had no children, the new pharaoh will be the governor of the land who provides the greatest tribute to the pharaoh. And if you've guessed it, the players are the governors, and we are looking to build monuments along the Nile, and that's going to be our tribute to the pharaoh. So on the table, we have a board, and that depicts the Nile, and it's split into 4 sections. And it's surrounded by different terrain for resource collection. You've got grain, clay and stone. And each player in front of them has a screen, and this will hide all their resources and all their workers. They will also have 3 sets of monuments to build, each and a camel. On a turn, the pharaoh's barge represents the 4 seasons, i.e. the 4 rounds of the game. And it's moving along the river to depict each round. On a turn, the players are going to draw workers from a bag. Now, the workers are linked to the resource types, and they can only collect from the matching terrain. You have a basic worker, which can be placed in the sections where the barge is already arrived at or has already passed through. And you've also got a master worker, and these can be placed anywhere, so they can advance past the barge. Players basically continue getting these resources, and they've got to build monuments with the resources. When these monuments actually go into the worker placement areas, and they're going to block them off, so there's fewer of these areas as the game moves on. Also in the game, there are boon cards that the player's going to start off with, and once per round they can use these. And also city cards that you can obtain throughout the game. Both can be used to gain advantage or to break the rules slightly. I mentioned the camels at the beginning. Now these can be placed into camps, and they basically can get you more resources, and there are also spaces to recruit more workers and a market to trade goods. This all continues until the barge reaches the 4th section, and this triggers the end of the game, where, as most games are, the person scoring the most points from the monuments will become the new pharaoh, Ronan. Sailing Towards Osiris.
Aside from a fairly bland board, but I understand why they did it, a fabulous production, Sean. Really nice pieces and big table appeal.
A huge table appeal. The artwork on the individual cards and on your player screens. So I thought the board was quite bright and quite sort of cheerful almost.
It's just sand with the Nile going through it. I know you're putting colourful pieces on there, so you don't want the board to be too busy because then it would be clashy. I understand why they did it, but apart from that, was the one exception, the production of the pieces and everything was really, they've done a very, very good job with it.
Yeah, you could tell this one came through Kickstarter, and you could tell that. And I didn't actually investigate it while it was a Kickstarter. I kind of missed the boat, missed the boat completely with that one. So I'm guessing that maybe these were upgrades for stretch goals, maybe, and they wanted these company that included it in the box for everyone. So yeah, maybe, but yeah, definitely a bright and dynamic feel to the artwork and the components, Ronan.
Daily Magic do make nice looking games.
Yes,
we got. I always hark back to Card Kingdoms of Valeria. It looks lovely. The card art is great in that. So they're a company with across the board high production values. For every high, there must be a low. I do wish they'd gone for a different theme, and in two different ways. The first one is we've seen Egypt and the Nile and this sort of iconography so much that it wasn't fresh. And the second thing is, for me, it's just a variant. It's just another Dead King game. The theme, the king's dead, the pharaoh's dead, the chieftain's dead, a god is dead, and you are the rivals vying to be the next one up.
Well, one of the points I'm 100% on board with, the other one not so much. Now, the one I'm 100% on board with is the Dead King. Yeah, I mean, that is rife, and that is rife throughout the games from, like, the 90s, the noughties, right up to the present day. There's always been those Dead King games. Now, I think there's been a bit of a tail-off in ancient Egypt games. I don't think there's been that many recently, for sure. And most of the ones that I can name off the top of my head are all sort of 5, 10, 15 years old now, so I think maybe I'll give them a pass on that, but certainly a familiar theme.
Just sticking with that a little bit, because it's kind of the theme of my review towards it and what my approach is. Really approachable in graphic design and in the way the game progresses, and the fact that everything makes sense. You can see where the ship is going. You can see that that's going to open up. And as things close behind, more opportunities open up further ahead. And you can see the direct impact of the actions you take during the game. There's nothing obfuscated. There's not a lot that's multi-step. And the iconography helps with all that, in that I do this, it has that direct impact.
Yes, super easy game to learn. The iconography certainly helps that. But just touching on your point a little bit there, Ronan, one of the things I felt, especially during my first game, was that I almost felt a little bit disjointed right at the beginning of my first game, because I didn't realise, like, you don't really sort of understand how much the board is going to fill up, and you don't really know what to go for at the beginning. There's no clear path, or I didn't see one anyway, right from the beginning. You've kind of got, right, okay, so I can go from there and there if I've got only basic workers, and if I'm lucky enough to get a master, I can. But what do I want to go for? And right at the beginning, I just felt like there wasn't a clear nod towards the end of the game.
Yeah, I take your point, but I'm going to use it to lead on to another point, in that, okay, but what you start with, although you're building monuments, is not set in stone. No. I'll give you a second to appreciate that.
I'm appreciating it.
Yeah, shall I move on?
Move on.
And that is an approach that's taken throughout the whole game. Everything is slightly mitigated. So yes, I can understand kind of that feeling of being a bit all at sea at the beginning and saying, well, I don't know, because I can do something of everything. But as soon as you start doing something, your pattern then emerges. The game in every stage brings in a sort of backdoor mitigation so that nothing is too punishing. And that includes how you start off the game. It also goes through to things like being vicious to each other and blocking off. For example, because there's always a way, if you're trying to create a chain of monuments to get your bonus score and someone throws one in the middle, there's ways of moving monuments around.
There is, yes.
There's sort of the card play. So it never really ties you in. It never gets to a level of frustration. Although it is wide open at the beginning, it's not one of those that you feel like, right, here's my first step. 6 turns time, I go, that was a complete misstep and I'm never going to catch up.
I think, if you're not a complete imbecile and don't spend one of your brew cards...
Don't leap to that conclusion.
As I was spending one of my boon cards to move a monument right at the beginning. Don't do that, people. Yeah, there is that mitigation to it, Ronan, for sure. But what you learn, I think, as you go on and play this game more and more, is that there are other little things that you can do to be quite mean, and there's not necessarily mitigations against those. It's blocking off the actual monument building spots. You can leave your dauber there and block off that monument building spot throughout a whole round, and someone might be desperate to build, I don't know, a sphinx, and you're blocking off the sphinx spots, and you just leave it there because you know you can build it at any time. I think little things like that just come to the fore once you've played it a few times, and I'm still discovering little bits. But what I do want to say about this game, Ronan, is throughout every game I've played, it just screams gateway game.
It is the perfect game to develop gamer brain.
For sure.
Where if you haven't played whatever we want to call these games, modern games, whatever you might be, it's very hard to sometimes get into that pattern and you have to be introduced a certain way. Most people, some people can pick up Zolkin as their first game and play it. I still can't play Zolkin. We played it yesterday. I came last. The leader doubled my points. Anyway, some people can do that. Most people can't. And certainly for myself, in the first year or two I was playing games, I didn't like games that were too interactive, but then I didn't like solitaire games. And this hits that balance perfectly. Also, with stuff like the timing of your boons and the use of your cards, and then looking into, like you say, there's a level of mechanisms which is obvious where you can play and do okay and score some points and not get frustrated and feel like, oh yeah, okay. The second time you play, you will probably get better. And the third time you play, you'll probably get better again. It was all experienced players playing. I don't think that progress would happen. So I think it's a perfect game to begin a journey or continue on a journey into the hobby.
Yeah. Well, I've written actually something down on my notes, and it's literally not enough to have multiple players as a seasoned player, but certainly an interesting experience for players new to the scene.
Well, that's a very formal way of phrasing
there
that.
You go, yeah.
They should write that on the box lid. That's like a real punch, that phrase. So I think we're kind of getting into danger of retreading the same ground here, so I'm just going to kick in. Because my first comment on my sum-up is perfect gateway drug. It develops good play, it develops that pattern of thinking, it breaks mass market gaming conventions, bad habits or what have you, or patterns of play that you get from playing more mass market games. For nascent gamers, it's absolutely perfect. For me, other than playing it as that, I'm not going to get pulled back to the table again and again. But for what they've tried to do, it can't be faulted.
Yeah, for me, you start off with the really nice component quality, so I'm drawn in by that. And then what I noticed that there was, even as an experienced player, there was a couple of things that developed over one or two plays. Now, I don't think this is one that I'm going to play week in, week out. This is like a every few months type game. But for that, it's a good, solid game. Definitely one for a gateway game and for introducing those concepts that maybe a Ticket to Ride or something might not quite bring to the fore. I think it also scales well. I think for all player counts, it scales really well, and it's a recommended game for me, but maybe not for myself all the time. And that is Sailing Toward Osiris.
Well, should you happen to come across Centerville as you're sailing towards Osiris, while you're sailing towards Osiris,
that well-known ancient Egyptian town, yeah,
I will give you a great welcome to Centerville, Sean, in a seamless segue. This is Welcome to Centerville, a 2017 game, 2 to 4 players, taking around 75 minutes from GMT Games, famous for publishing probably heavier and more warlike games than this usually, and designed by Chad Jensen, who has the award for having designed the unarguably best game ever designed, Dominant Species, and also Combat Commander and Urban Sprawl. Definitely not the best game ever designed. Anyway, what are we doing in Welcome to Centerville? We are rolling some dice in order to develop the town of Centerville, and we're doing it competitively against each other. We are going to be scoring in both prestige and wealth, and at the end of the game, the lowest of those two scores is going to be your end score. On your turn, you're going to pick up 6 dice, you're going to roll them, you have up to 2 re-rolls, and you can re-roll any dice apart from if you've rolled a time icon, because rolling a time icon pushes the time along the track. You get a small little little boon for doing that. It's not great. And then once we've gone through 3 rounds down the track, at the end of each round we're going to score, and there's some final endgame scoring at the end of that 3rd round. What are we trying to do? Well, Centerville itself is on the board. It's split into 4 quarters, and there's a dice which is coloured to match each of the 4 quarters. And on one of the faces of those dice is a contract, and when you use contracts, you can use a contract of a colour that can be boosted up by wild results you can get on these dice, or contracts of other colours, and that's going to allow you to build in the city. Each of the quarters of the city has got 3 levels. You need 1, 2 or 3 matching dice faces to build in level 1, 2 or 3, and you're going to do that because each of those quarters is going to score and punish the leader and the loser respectively at the end of each of the 3 rounds, and 2 of the quarters are going to score and punish you in wealth, and 2 are going to score and punish you in prestige. If you get 4 results of the same type of anything during the game, you're going to get a special bonus, and it happens that in contracts you get an increase in your status, which is another track in the game, and you're going to want to do that because status will score you points at the end of the 3 rounds. But also when you get kicked out of status, you earn favours, and favours allow you to break the rules of the game at certain times, and most especially to break the status quo, like moving people out of areas in the city or stealing some of the things they have collected. The last thing you can do in that city is that if you roll 3 benches, which basically means a bench on the green die and 2 wilds, you can put a cube in the park, and that counts as 1 strength in each of the 4 quarters. That's the city sorted, but there's other stuff we can do. We can roll trees to go up a tree track, which is going to help us score points at the end of rounds. 3 trees lets us build a villa. Again, we can choose for that villa to be prestige or wealth to help us balance out our scoring. If we get 4 trees, we get to build one of 4. There's only 4 of them. Level 4 buildings in a city. There's 1 in each quarter, and that's going to help you dominate those quarters. There are education results. The number of education results you get is going to give you access to vocation tiles. The more education results you have, the better or rarer vocation tiles you're going to get, and at the end of the game, those are going to score you for sets of the same and also sets of different ones. Last thing you can really do with your die rolls are you can get votes, and there are 6 different offices you can claim, and when you claim those offices you're going to get bonuses. For example, if you claim the mayor, you go straight to the top of the status track, which will score you points and also give you a chance to get those favour tokens. You might get an immediate extra go with just 1 die missing. You might get bonuses, or you might be immune from hazards on the various tracks around the board, and any player passes them, you take the hazard tile up and no one gets to look at it. It goes into the bag of vocation tiles. When it gets drawn, bad things are going to happen to you unless you are indeed immune. If you ever do get 4 votes, you can do one of those special actions and hand them in, and you can choose a coloured die, and you don't have to roll it on your turn. You can choose the face off it. The last type of scoring you get is that everyone is dealt a legacy tile at the beginning of the game from a pool. You get to see it, no one else does, but at the end of the game, all players are going to score for whatever it is that is on your legacy tile. Sean, welcome to Centerville. Perhaps an unusual game to be published by GMT. It very much has the feeling of a roll and write game, but on a board, so you're using cubes to mark things rather than a marker, and on a shared board at that.
Yeah, so you stole my thunder there. That was going to be my opening gambit. It felt like a roll and write game. So thanks for that.
That's because it's so obvious. It's just the thing you have to say. This feels like a roll and write with more.
Obvious kid is obvious. That's fine.
Kid. Obvious lump is obvious.
Obvious lump is lumpy.
Okay. Obviously lumpy?
Obviously.
Should we move on?
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay, good.
So I recently got into a little bit of trouble for mentioning box covers. Now, the box cover of this actually draws me in and makes me... I want to go to Centerville based on the box cover. So I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, oh, look, it's really nice artwork. I'm enjoying the box cover. Let's see what's in. And when you get into the box, it's all a bit spreadsheety. It's all a bit...
I like that.
That's the way your mind works, you boring. Come on.
I like grids. I like straight lines. I like spreadsheets. I like clear information. There's a lot going on that board. It could have been a really busy board. To me, it's not. And to me, I can look at the board and grok the game situation immediately.
So did you really, I can't remember, did you really hate the look of Inish?
Yeah,
like the opposite of this is just all wavy lines.
We had rounds about it on the podcast. I think it looks terrible. And the fact it played terribly didn't help my mood.
How dare they not have a straight line on that game?
We could do a mini review of Inish if you want. It was alright, but it had the Discworld problem, or the nanny, whatever it's called now, with the controversial immigrant rule in it. I don't know what they were thinking there. But it just got to the end where you stop him, you stop him, you stop her, she stops you, she stops her, I stop you, stop you. Oh, you forgot to stop that person, that's the one that wins. It could have been any of us, but that's the one that someone forgot to stop.
And that was Inish.
And Nantucket.
Nantucket, yeah.
Controversial immigrant rule.
Yeah, that was a strange choice. Anyway,
should we go back to Centerville? They'll welcome us back with open arms.
They will welcome us back. So, I didn't feel...
You didn't feel Phil?
I didn't feel Phil. You know what I'm saying?
Phil's gutted.
I don't think I can say much more about that game. I didn't feel Phil.
Is that your closing statement?
That's my closing statement. I didn't feel I was in Centerville. I didn't feel it was thematic. When I started to feel like something, okay, that makes sense. You bring in the dice and it's like, right, that makes no sense.
Yeah, but I have that problem with every game in this genre. Every one I play, whether it's No Siesta or Steamrollers or whatever it might be, I almost prefer it when they're not thematic, where they just go, Gangster and Clever, it's just the wrong right. It's so hard to tie a theme to that. So, doesn't it just come with the territory? Am I being too lenient with it there? Maybe, but I think for me, my personal thoughts are I like to delve into a game. I like to feel I'm in that game. And when a game is abstract, fine. My mindset is then, okay, well, that's abstract. But you kind of draw me in with that box cover. You're drawing me in with all these... Can I just ask you, how exciting you thought a game about town planning was going to be?
I was so excited. I've got Town Centre. I've got the one by Golden Egg Games. I can't remember what it's called. I like the thought of building up a town. I'm a Sim City man. What do you expect?
Yeah, man. I bet you played with monsters and disasters on and all that rubbish, didn't you?
No.
Messing with my spreadsheets. Okay. This got weird already.
Right, so,
okay, let me say something.
No, why would I let you say anything?
I don't know. Go on then.
Go on.
It's tricky to explain, and I was trying to think why it was tricky to explain, and I think it's because the actions that you're doing are not obviously linked to the way they score, and that can be also part of the thematic disconnect, because you're looking at it going, okay, so if I place down a level 3 building in the blue quarter, I would expect maybe to score 3 points, but it doesn't do that. It gives you a majority which might give you points if someone else doesn't jump in ahead of you, and then it might prevent you from losing, and then it's one of the two different points. And when you're looking at your two scores and you're going, I'm really behind here in money, but my prestige is good. And you look at the board and you think, why? How's that happened? I don't understand why one is above the other, because my actions don't tie into that. It's not like I'm investing in something to get my money up. I'm doing exactly the same almost as I am to get my prestige up. It's just that half the board is this and half the board's that. And I think that's where the theme could have been tied in a bit better.
It certainly takes a turn or three to sort of get your head round where you're going to score your points. And
did you say a game or three?
Maybe a game or three.
I've seen your scores.
By this stage, anyone who's got any experience in the game has probably lapped you, as Ronan often does in this game. I've never quite managed to get my head around it. Now, I touched on earlier, Ronan, that part of the thematic disconnect was the dice rolling, but I also felt like the dice were quite harsh within the game itself. See, you've got what I've termed as this almost spreadsheet game, roll and write game, but let's take away the roll away, but like a spreadsheet, and you're doing things to influence things, and you're trying to get area majorities, and you're trying to win votes, and you're trying to get all these things that you feel like you're going to have a lot of control over, and all of a sudden these dice come in and they can completely undermine everything you're trying to do. So I think in this one you've got to have 2 or 3 strategies and just go with the flow, and that didn't sit quite right with me as well.
It still sounds like a review of the whole genre. Like, this doesn't do it any differently to any of the other ones. It's how can you have a strategy? I rolled 4 education, I'll take the media tile. I rolled 3 education, I'll take that. All right, I'm definitely going after the vocations. I didn't roll another one for 7 turns.
But the game feels like you should have a strategy, and you should be working towards something, and you aren't really. You're going with the rolls.
You have to accept it. You got to roll with the rolls.
Roll with the roll.
Or blow with the rolls?
No, I think gives you.
No, not that. Okay. No. Okay, but all right, here we go. I'm going to end with a good and a bad. You ready? Do you want the good or the bad first?
I'll have the bad.
There's nothing to do when it's not your turn, and players' turns can take a while.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, yes.
Brilliant. See, just agree with me, Sean, and we'll cut half the podcast out, and it'll be the bad half, so that's fine. I like some of the interactions. I like the interactions with the votes, because you have to build up a lead in the votes, and you have to have more than the current occupant to take over. But at the end of each scoring round, they'll score loads of points, and you score in both categories, actually, for having votes. It can be quite powerful. It resets down, and they only have one presence. And immediately with two, you can take it off them again. So there's a bit of nip and tuck and what have you. And certain ones become more powerful. They fade in power, whereas like the fire chief, who, immune from the hazards, that becomes more powerful as the game goes on. And in terms of the town, as long as you've got some favours, you've understood, pump my status up so I can get favours, you can kick people out the town, and it can become swingy like that, and you can actually go after someone in an area where they're weak. Like if I'm on 100 prestige but only 60 money, I will start kicking out all my money cubes out the town using your favours, and then I start being in real trouble. And I like that there is interaction, not necessarily between turns, but on your turn you can affect the other players.
Yeah, there were certain. Don't get me wrong, I'm being very negative about this so far. Yeah, because I found it frustrating more than I didn't like it. There were certain elements of the game that I really did enjoy, and that was going to be part of my summing up, where that vote, when you're going into the council space and you're trying to get the votes, and the to and fro of that, and being ousted and going back in, and which ones do you want to gain control over, and which ones can you gain control over. Just
a little note on that. If you're ever playing me and Sean at Welcome to Centerville, and we start rowing over a vote space, just leave us to it. We're going to waste most of our turns. I now have 9 cubes in there. Yeah, now I've got 10. That didn't seem possible, but you've done
nothing else for 8 rounds.
But I beat you, and I score a point, so there you go.
That bit I enjoyed. And there were elements in there that I enjoyed, but yeah.
Go on, roll into your sum up.
Yeah, I think I'm ready to sum up. I wanted to go to Centerville. I wanted to settle down and bring up my family and have lots of fun in Centerville. And what I felt was it just didn't live up to the poster. It just didn't live up to the estate and what the estate agent told me it was going to be like in Centerville. Normally, I'm a dice man. Normally, dice make everything better. But this one, I wanted a little bit more control. The negative scoring really, really is punishing. And sometimes it's just by bad luck, and sometimes it's by bad planning, but more often by bad luck. And for once, and I think it's few and far between, I think the dice have actually ruined this game to a large degree. So Centerville, I'll go and visit you occasionally, but I'm not living in you.
Good to know. All right, I'm going to ask you a question before I sum up.
Go on.
Is part of your reaction to it because it was a GMT game and you're expecting something possibly more strategic or card-driven or something like that?
100%, yeah.
Because it came from this publisher?
Yes.
Marvellous. That was good analysis by me. I'm going to a little tick next to my name.
Yeah, well done you.
Yeah, I am great. This is a mashup of stuff that I've seen already. There was nothing in that really excited me. I think that barrier I discussed between mechanisms and scoring, it makes it hard for new players. It means experienced players are going to win, which that actually is a good sign for the game. It means you get better and you learn and you realise when to exploit certain opportunities, and when there's low numbers of votes somewhere, jump in there while you can, and all the rest of it. So that's quite cool, but it does seem at the beginning too much for the weight of game you're playing. You're just doing a 3 reroll game, Yahtzee in effect, but with fancy bits. So having to then puzzle out this double scoring thing can feel too much to people. The whole genre, as I kept saying it to Sean, I was definitely doing projection there. I don't like roll and write games. All power to those that do, and we know that there's lots of people that do. They're hugely popular. I'm yet to find one that I really enjoy, to be honest with you, and this didn't greatly change my mind. But I think it's a well done game. It's one of my more favoured of them. There's plenty of roll and write games I'll just refuse to play. This one I will play and enjoy playing it. So well done, but Welcome to Centerville was not exciting to me. that is the end of our first half. We're going to have the tiniest little breaks, do what you've got to do, and join us back here. And Sean is going to go searching for buried treasure?
Arr, maybe.
Aye.
Hello and welcome back to part 2. We're going to kick off now with Loot Island, a 2017 release from What's Your Game, designed by Aaron Haag, who did Yannan, which was a game me and Ronan quite liked but never really got to play again after our initial play, and it's 2 to 5 players. So, the year is 1640 AD, and a terrible curse has been cast upon a beautiful island in the Indian Ocean. This curse means that dark magic will affect anyone taking anything away from the island. Now we're going to fast forward in it's 1902, and we are treasure hunters who have, between us, found fragments of a treasure map that lead us to the cursed island. So on the table we have a small board, and I mean a small board, representing the island and the sea around it. Also on the board are 2 circles depicting landing areas on each corner of the island, and 4 spaces for a little wooden ship piece to move. Around the board are smaller island tiles, and these have special actions on them. And each player is going to have a character card, a hand of treasure map cards, and 3 discs of their colour. There are also event cards, treasure cards, healer cards, and curse cubes. The main part of the player turns will be playing these map cards to any landing on the island. The placement rules are that any card can be placed onto an empty landing, but subsequent cards must match the colour and be equal or higher numbers than the one already placed. The player adding the cards will also then add a disc from their supply, and some of the cards have special powers that can affect the players with discs already on the landing, like giving more cards, giving them curse cubes and more. So why are they doing this? Well, if the wooden ship is in the corner with a landing, or landings with at least 6 cards on them, they will score and the players will get to search for loot. The person lowest in the stack, i.e. closest to the board, will have first choice and will most likely get more treasure choices than the others. I spoke about curse cubes earlier. Now you're going to amass these by taking the treasures from the map cards throughout the game. If you ever have 13 or more at the game end, you're eliminated. Otherwise, you're going to gain money for your loot cards, and these all score in differing ways. You have set collection, majorities, face value, etc. And lastly, there are a selection of healer cards available. And you're going to choose these, and they're going to remove your curse cubes. But you will have to pay different amounts because each of them are different. The player with the fewest curse cubes is going to choose first, and so on. After all the curses are removed, the player with the most money left wins the game. Ronan, Loot Island. We covered this one in one of our treasure hunt episodes.
If you can remember the name of our formats, please.
Why would I be able to do this at... It is now midnight. Never going to happen.
Because we're both going on to night shifts, we really should be waking up around this time of night.
When's that ever worked?
True, right.
True.
We did cover it in a treasure hunt. Didn't you say it was a treasure?
I said I was worried about it, I believe, but I said it was a treasure because What's Your Game? I'm a big fan of What's Your Game.
Because of what?
What's Your Game?
Yeah, no. Can you just... Is the game anywhere near you?
Why?
I need you to check the box.
It's not near me.
I need you to check that they still published it, that this is actually a What's Your Game.
I see where you're going now. You had me confused for a moment there. I see where you're going. It is the least What's Your Game that
What's Your Game ever gamed?
No, but seriously, they're here every week.
Dear my mother-in-law. What? I don't know. I feel like I need to get them into some sort of therapy, or we need to have a hug and a chat, or a safe place, or something, some trust falls.
Yeah, What's Your Game? The tight, cube pusher, economical. Produce this? Right.
What? I don't. sometimes when we're reviewing, especially because we're going to do our top 3 of these 6 games at the end for the grand finale, I like to hold back a little bit. I give you my opinion, but you'll find out at the end what I really thought of them. But there's not a lot I can hold back here, Sean, and I really don't feel like holding back. What is this game?
Right, okay, so let's break it down, man. Let's break it down. We saw this one in our treasure hunt, and we were looking at the box, and obviously you don't get a feel for the size of the box. And then we went to Essen, and then we saw it on the table, and I was like, is that like a miniature? Is that the travel edition? It's a tiny little board with tiny little components. Just bizarre. I suppose it's functional.
You try to dodge the abuse for things not having shelf presence by saying the size of the box looks odd.
No, the size of the board. The size of the board. Yeah, no, not the board. Like,
but if the board was any big, I mean, like, you do lines of cards out of it. It takes up enough of a footprint.
Yeah, I suppose it is. Yeah, it's functional.
So what else are you going to do?
I don't know.
Trust me, if we're talking about issues with this game, that is not one of the top 30.
Fair enough,
right. Okay, I'm going to try and pick apart a few of the things. In fact, what I did was I took a top 3 things that I didn't like about the game. All right.
How long was the list?
Jesus, longer than that. Longer than this episode, and this episode is going to be long enough as it is. Right, let's start with the small island. Instead of playing your card, you can flip over one of the small islands. The 6 of them, they reset between each round. And
you have to have 2 matching cards of the same card.
2 matching cards and discard them off.
Discard them, yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Totally remove the benefit of planning in the game. Add total and utter rubbish. If they weren't in it, the game would be 20% better. They do things like move the ship on a whole coast. Now, the ship only ever moves in one direction. If you've set up your hand of cards to be winning some treasure in a thing, and someone, just for their turn, just flips that island, which is always available every round, it's not even a game thing, and moves the ship on, all your cards are left behind. You're just there. What are you doing that for?
But it's neither fish nor fowl, because what they could have done was add multiple times. Like, because when you use one of these islands in a round, you flip it down, and there's only one use of each of the islands. So if you'd have had like multiple uses, and so people could try and get that ship back towards where they wanted it,
everyone could do it once a game.
Something like that.
There are a set of 6 tiles, so I'm going to use my one ship thing. Yeah.
Fine, okay, yeah, you knackered me now, but now I know you can't do that anymore. So now I can plan a bit more surrounding your abilities. So yeah, or like it would be funny if everyone could just move it around. It wouldn't be great, but it'd be funny. This is just irritating because you know that one person doesn't want it there, so you've almost got to waste a turn if you're ahead in turn order. If you're not, they're going to move it.
Or move the order of discs in a stack. So irritating because the order of discs in a stack can be so important. First choice, and let's say there's 3 discs in a stack and there's 4 treasures. You get 2 treasures. You get the first treasure. So important. So much part of the actual tactics in the game of getting in first, taking control.
Yeah, 100%. Again, somebody can decide, right, okay, that's got loads of treasure in it. That's going to have like 12 treasures. I'm not on that island. Right, I'm going to join that. If that small island is available where you can move your disc all the way to the bottom, all the other players have got to waste cards, and their cards are very valuable in the game, to stop you getting that. Now, they might already be at the bottom. They've got to waste those cards, and it's one use. Again, that's gone. If you get to it because you just happen to get to it, then for doing nothing, you're going to get the first pick of all the treasure.
This issue leeching into my next issue. But if you are third or fourth in turn order, you can't set the colour for the first 2 of the ship is at the moment. You could set the colour for the next 2, so that's where your planning is. I'm planning to make up for this shortfall here. Like Sean set the colour as black there, Rachel set the colour as brown there. Right, great. So I'm going to set the colour as the cards I've got here on the next one. But someone could just push the ship past, or someone could just change the order of the discs, or someone could do some other kind of rubbish, and you just go, what am I doing? Why am I playing? And that brings me into Sean knows that this enrages me about the game. And while I call this one thing that's a problem, there are multiple subcategories of the turn order issue. It is absolutely ridiculous. It is the worst turn problem. They have turn order problems in other ones of their games, and they've had to fix other ones of their games for this. They're heavier games, and for some reason they still get a pass, and I quite like Watch Your Game, so I give them a pass as well. When they mess up Railroad Revolution, and they've got problems with turn order and Nippon and all the other stuff, okay, but you're trying your best. You didn't try your best with Loot Island. You tried your worst. It's terrible. Right. When you're third or even fourth, or the colours of each of the islands are set, the players you play early gain benefits from other cards that are played on top of theirs. So if Sean chucks a 2-3 down a brown, and then people are trying to get in there because he's chucked a couple, when they put on there, everyone who's in that stack draws an extra card. He's gone first, he's set the colour, he's getting the extra card. Everyone who's already there gets to remove a curse cube. Now he gets to remove a curse cube. What am I getting as a benefit for being third or fourth? Oh, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll set up the second coast. Oh, don't worry about it. Sean in his turn just going to skip past. Also, if I set up the second coast to be a certain colour, I'm doing it from one-handed cards. Let's say I set it up to be whatever, black, on one of these things. Sean then can save all his black cards from this turn, get to draw more cards, so he's get 2 handfuls of cards knowing what colour it's going to be, and then play all the black cards he saved from 2 handfuls down, whereas I'm just fishing in the deck for more to hopefully not get absolutely screwed over. He has more information to plan his hand than I do. Absolutely rubbish. He's got the advantage on disc order. He's got the advantage next round to move that ship on from one. So many issues with turn order, and that just means it's a terrible game design.
I think it's not just turn order, it's the random card draw, isn't it, as well? Because you've got no agency on what cards you get into your hand.
But if you're early, in the first round, it
doesn't matter. Yeah,
because you can retain certain cards. And you go, oh, those cards are useful and those are not. So, and then so you have more chance of getting better cards.
Well, there's two sides to it. Like you mentioned about, like, there are obviously cards that give everyone on the island already a nice little bonus. There are also cards that don't give you any bonus and just add to the treasure or add to it counts as 2 cards, etc. If you've got them, then you don't mind adding to a large stack of cards a bit more treasure, so you make sure you get a little bit more treasure as well. But you're completely dependent on the card draw. If you join a big treasure haul or you start off on your own landing, it's completely dependent on the cards you get. With the cards and adding cards and having to add to islands and moving this ship around, somewhere there was a decent idea.
Was there?
But I'm clutching for straws here, mate. So I felt like
before you start mollifying on the negativity, I've got to light that last firework.
Go on then, go on.
And is it just going to be a release Sean moment? The endgame healer cards.
Oh, don't get me started. Let's punish the person who's doing worse. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so at the end of the game, all the healer cards, and there's one for every player, get turned up. And there are some that are obviously the better ones. Some that are like, just here you go, you have to pay 7. Some, if you've got X amount of this and X amount of that, you have to pay 38. So obviously people are going to go, right, okay, well, I'm just going to pay the 7 because that's going to make him have to pay, or her have to pay 30. So you're already winning the game because you've got the fewest of the curse cubes, or you're in a very strong position. And then you're just being punished on top of that. I just don't understand it. I don't understand the thought behind this. You're just punishing somebody who hasn't been able to do very well in the game. I just don't understand.
It's a rare combination that we rarely see of not mass market mechanisms, gaming mechanisms used to create less fun. That is a rare thing to have pulled off.
And if the game wasn't random, like I've talked about the random cards, the random healer cards, you can get a massive swing on those. I've talked about, like, obviously you randomise the starter positions. The loot is completely random. You can't say, right, I'm going to go and dig for this one because I need that type. It's completely random. Again, it's another random part of a random game.
Because that's random, what happens then is people will pile on to one pile in a colour because they'll go, right, if 13 treasure cards come out, even though I'm third in the order, I'm more likely to get something I want because you're collecting medallions, you're collecting the crosses, and I'm after whatever. So I'm going to get those. So then you have massive pylons in certain ports and other ports get ignored. And you can't control that either. So you might constantly be starting off ports that never give you any treasure. Because it doesn't happen to be the fashionable card colour that everyone else has got. Okay, look, this is terrible. It's too chaotic. I have no idea why they published it. It is just one of the worst games I've played recently. Loot Island is awful.
So yeah, Loot Island, I kind of gave it a hopeful punt in terms of it was a watch your game production when we did our treasure hunt. I then watched the game being played in Essen and I was not impressed, but we always try to revisit the games that we have covered in our treasure hunts, and it came up in the UK Games Expo for a £5. So you know what, for the show, I did it for the show, Ronan.
You took one for these people, for these good people.
I took one for the show, Ronan, and I still regret that £5. So it really wasn't worth it. And
Faux show, it wasn't.
Oh, you know what? At least I've got a bag of black cubes if I'm ever missing black cubes out of something.
Because you ain't trading that away.
I tried recently. I got no bites.
No thanks, mate. Okay.
That was Loot Island.
It was Loot Island. Can we move on? Hopefully it will sink beneath the waves. Our penultimate game of this episode is Founders of Gloomhaven, a 2018 release for 1 to 4 players, taking 2 hours or maybe slightly upwards, from a previously unheard of company until a couple of years ago, Sir Falafair Games, and Isaac Childress, the man himself of Gloomhaven, well, mega fame, let's call it nowadays. In Founders of Gloomhaven, each of the players is going to play as a race. And all the races are going to be working together to found the city of Gloomhaven in a spirit of harmony. Each race begins with a set type of resource, and they get to draft control of one other type of resource, or a couple if you're playing 2-player. And the resources you can draft are limited according to your race, because you can't get yourself a head start on a certain technology tree of building up through levels of buildings as we develop Gloomhaven, as we will discover as we move onwards. The city itself starts as an empty grid with 4 different types of terrain and split into 3 different areas, and each player has got 1 stall each on the board. Everyone has a deck of action cards. On your turn, you can either play any action card face down, which will give you access to a very basic action, which will be linked to the things I'm about to discuss, or you can do a full action, which every other player around the board gets the choice to follow or take a basic action. If they follow, they get to do kind of the same thing you've done, but slightly less effective, as is familiar with lots of types of these games. What can you do? You can trade as the first type of action. That is how you bring resources onto the board. You can either bring one of your own basic resources on. This is the only time you can build anywhere on the board. The other thing you can do is buy into other people's basic resources and their stalls by paying money, and you will then slip your disc underneath theirs. Ownership of a building once it's built never changes, but it gives you access to their resources, and you're going to see why that is important. You're going to want to build these resources because in order to move up and upgrade, and that is the next action you can take is upgrade, in order to build tier 2, tier 3 buildings, they must have access to these basic 8 resources which each of the races start with. And in fact, you must have access by either owning the resource or having paid to get in on someone else's stall. Once you do that, you can choose the upgrade action and choose a tier 2 building that requires the basic resources that you have got access to, and you can connect to it using roads. You can build roads either from a basic action by using this upgrade action if you choose it for yourself, and placing that tier 2 building down connected to the tier 1 building is going to score points. The person who built it is going to score a certain number of points, but depending upon which building you've built, some of those points are going to cascade down to the owners of the base resources required for that building. It's a spatial puzzle, and you're always going to have to cooperate to do this. You will never build a tier 2 building using only your own resources. And every time you build resources, be it tier 1, tier 2 or tier 3 buildings, and tier 3 buildings often need a combination of tier 2 or tier 1 buildings, you are going to push your income up in money, because upgrading and trading costs money to get those tiles onto the board. Next thing you can do is you can build a special building. You can build bridges or gates which give you access to the other sections of the city from the things you've built across the walls or the river, but only access to yourself. Roads are open access for everyone. Or you can build a house which must go in a forest, and when you build a house in a forest, that gives you a worker, because there is a slight amount of worker placement. One of the basic actions you can do is to place a worker. Each race has its own action, or there are actions on prestige buildings. We're going to get to prestige buildings in a second. The fourth of the 5 actions you can do is to recruit. You recruit advisors, and this is basically more action cards that come into your hand. They do slightly upgraded versions of the basic actions, and they also, when you recruit, earn you influence. There are 2 types of influence in the game. It's lasting or it's fleeting. Fleeting will disappear the next time someone does the final action, which is call to vote. When you call to vote, you're going to get a bonus dependent upon the number of cards left in your hand. Then all other players are going to get their income in money, depending upon the number of resources that they have got access to. Then there are 3 prestige buildings that have been on offer, and everyone's going to vote on which prestige building they wish to be built. You're going to use influence you've gathered from those actions, be they fleeting or lasting. Fleeting will disappear at the end of this round. Lasting will not, but lasting is worth 2 votes rather than the 1 of a fleeting. It's your choice how important this prestige building is to you, and let me tell you, it is vital to control the prestige buildings that go into play. These prestige buildings come as a blueprint. They require certain resources in order to be built, and it's always a wide mix of resources, and they require at least one of the squares of the grid of Gloomhaven that they cover to be of a certain terrain type. That blueprint will then go into play. You're looking to connect the required resources to the prestige. As soon as that happens, no one needs to do any other actions. It will just fill up with those resources. Once your prestige building is completely full of the resources it requires, it is built and it flips over and it becomes a worker placement area which is available to all the players in the game. It's going to score the people who have supplied the goods to it all the way through, points as they go. And once you've built 6 prestige buildings, that is going to be the end of the game. Sean, founders of Gloomhaven. I was trying not to take too long describing it there, because even in person it is difficult to describe. Trying to get these people to understand the whole spatial aspect and the cascading and the having to connect, and we certainly haven't gone into details of how you connect, and there's a lot of complications there. Whew. Founders of Gloomhaven.
Right, Ronan, while before your rant motor has wound completely down,
yes,
I'm going to pass the look of the game for now, and I'm going to start on the rule book. Would you like to take us through that rule book?
Well, now, I'm not going to rant about this.
What?
Now, I've got a little list of barriers to entry for fans of Gloomhaven, and the rulebook is on there. It is one of the 3 points that I want to bring up, because, as with the Gloomhaven rulebook, it's a little bit of a stream of consciousness, and it's written like he's telling you about the game rather than teaching you the game, and it's written in paragraphs rather than easy to find reference points. So it's a unique style, and it's definitely not the best style. The thing for me is that both in Gloomhaven and in Founders of Gloomhaven, I kind of understand him when he writes these rule books, and it's not the absolute nightmare to learn that it is for some other people. Where I do get really frustrated is trying to go back to check a rule, because that's almost impossible. You almost learn in this game like a narrative, and trying to jump around the narrative to find out where he's mentioned this or where he mentioned that, or where he's put the certain exceptions in, or where the sentence that contains a key rule is the 5th sentence in a 6-sentence paragraph. It's not highlighted anyway. It's not a good rule book. It needs editing. He needs to get help with these rule books, because they are parts of the barriers to entry. But it wasn't the worst rulebook to me.
I see all the swearing texts that I got while you were learning this. I thought for sure you were going to go on a rant.
That's because I had to do the pit stop video, and I looked back, I did a 17-minute pit stop, which isn't really a pit stop, is it? That's just the rules explanation. And I ended up, because I was trying to clarify things going over and over. Half that frustration is because there are so many exceptions to the rules and so many fiddly things you have to be aware of. And in fact, in the pit stop, I build illegally at least twice without realising it. And that's after studying the rulebook and playing the game a couple of times. So He hasn't made it easier. He has put up walls around this game, which is going to make the first experience frustrating for people.
I think that's the buzzword for my review on this is fiddly. I think fiddly fits into this game nicely for me. I think you've got this board, and it's quite a dull board as it begins, and then becomes quite cluttered and messy, and the fiddly rules with the fiddly components and the fiddly board once it's all laid out, I think they just to hamper the immersion into the game and make wrong moves very easy to do.
Yeah, and one thing just to throw in there, the iconography's tiny.
Yes.
And when you're building things, they're going to be in all different orientations, and the information is only ever in one orientation.
Yeah.
So you end up with a board with information going to all 4 cardinal points.
Yeah.
Which we're talking about Welcome Centerville or any other game, we mention it all the time, that I like to be able to look at a board and grok it and straight line it and go, okay, I can see what's going on. Very, very hard to do in Fountains of Gloomhaven. Another barrier for entry because you're not going to play well. It's going to take a very certain type of brain and mind and player to be able to play this well on your first 5 plays even.
Maybe
because hard. It's hard to see the board, and it's hard to go. Even when you've got access to resources, what happens is you stick a disc on everything you build, and you say, I built this. This is mine. I own it. Great, and that never changes, and that at least is good. But let's say that Natalie had built a stall and had a resource. If I pay to get in there, my disc goes directly under her disc, and it's just not easy to see. And now I might remember I'm there, but other people might not. And in fact, in every game that I've played, people have built in, not realising that someone's jumped under them, and then they're planning to build a tier 3 building, forgetting that someone's under there, and that they are already 1 or 2 rounds ahead of them in building that building. And then it gets nicked off them, and then they get frustrated. So I just... In terms of that feeling, I did want to go back to the other 2 barriers to entry quick, Sean.
One second before you go on.
Go on.
I think it's actually a fair point to make that. I think if you've got any eyesight problems, I don't know if you can play this game because, as you said, the iconography is really small, obscuring of the discs, and the discs being quite small, and then that sort of jumble of information really that's on that board. I think if you've got any eyesight problems at all, you're going to struggle.
Again, I don't think accessibility to the game has been considered.
No,
he's clearly super clever. Yeah, he's clearly really a special mind. And we need to encourage him to carry on designing games and coming up with his ideas, because this is a unique game, and that's not often we can say that. He needs
a partner.
It's kind of like the Martin Wallace of a couple of years ago, right, where we were saying, dude, get out of publishing. You're no good at it. Stick with designing.
This guy is quite good at publishing.
He is good at publishing. He's not good at user interface.
Yeah.
He needs a sort of UI manager, and he needs a rulebook editor, and he needs someone who's able to say, I get the idea of this game, but we need to mitigate some of these things.
Yeah, streamline it.
No, it's not even streamline, just make it more playable.
So yeah, it's the Arkham Horror to Eldritch Horror. You've taken a really fiddly, clunky game with loads of things going on, and you've just said, right, here you go, here's a playable version of that.
But that was a gameplay change. I'd like to see this with the interface changed, with different ways of showing ownership, with a more intuitive way of showing how buildings get built. And then I'd like to play it, because those hurdles are so tiring to jump over, and you're constantly jumping over them, that you're a bit tired when you get to the actual, is this actually fun or not? The other thing that puts off when you first start playing it is the scoring is completely unintuitive, because you're paying to access people's goods. That doesn't give you any victory points. The VP for those resources will still go to the person who owns the resource. And you will never, if Sean's race power is to own wood, I will never own wood. And whenever I need to use wood, Sean will score points of it, and it would have cost me money. is a highly competitive game that feels like, hold on, I'm spending my money so that you can score points. There's a blog on BGG, a guy called Dustin, and he talks about games. I think it's all the colours of gaming or thematic colours of gaming, something like that. And he was saying that they played this game for 3 hours and no one had built a tier 2 building because they refused to pay money for someone else to score points. And you can kind of understand that. And he says, like, well, no one could do it. Yeah, because you have to pay into someone else. They don't get the money and then build and they get points from what you've done.
But you have to set yourself up in a position where your gain is at a certain level before you move into that. And it's not just that your gain is more, you're trying to get yourself further and further apart. So your gain is like twice what their gain is, or three times.
You can't do that into a tier 2 building. It's very difficult. Usually it's a point to one person, a point to another person, and you've done all the work. What you have to do then is plan what you're going to do with that tier 2 building, how you're going to build a tier 3
That's what I mean,
building.
your gain, like, as the game progresses.
Long term, which is impossible in your first game.
No, for sure.
No surprise to me at all that there are people playing one game and going, I'm never playing that game again, it was miserable. Because you have to plan, not only do you have to plan to tier 3, and this is kind of the last barrier to entry I was going to say, in order to do this game well, you have to plan for the prestige buildings. And you have to know, because they're limited to what terrains they can be on, what ones are in the game, what resources they require, and therefore what combination of tier 1, tier 2 and tier 3 resources I am building with access from them to the correct terrain type to be able to build the prestige buildings which will ultimately score me the lots of points that all that effort has taken where I've been drip feeding other people points all along. I mean, it's kind of genius, but how are you going to know that going into the game? And how are you going to learn those prestige buildings? And the game takes up a whole load of space and they end up these blueprints get all over the place, and what's the worker placement power on that one, and what's it on that one, and what are you connected to, and how have you got there, and where's your gate, and like the gates and the bridges look thematic, but it's quite hard to tell sometimes who's a who's.
That is absolutely 100% agreed. But now I played this very confused at times during the game. All the things you said, the scoring wasn't intuitive. Just the whole makeup of the game is difficult to get your head round.
But I do love the scoring system. But carry on.
Yeah, no, but the flip side for me was that the scoring system, not intuitive, but massively interactive. Everything in this game is so interactive. You are leeching off people, working with people, working around people. Everything you do matters to everyone. So that means every turn that somebody takes, maybe right at the beginning when you're all split off into you, but once you start joining up, every turn is of interest to you because you've got your fingers in so many pies and you're watching how other players are linking up and what other players are scoring off that player, the whose turn is scoring. So that is what kept me sort of from not dismissing this game.
It is a positive. I'm being too negative about the game, but the frustration is, mate, that what you then need to be able to do is, all right, Sean is doing that to do that, and he's going to build weapons there. My job then is to know what resources I need to have near weapons so that I can exploit the fact that weapons are available in that space or going to be available in that space. That's where the good play comes in. Where you go, okay, he's building weapons, so I know there's 2 prestige builders that want weapons and they also want cogs or whatever. So therefore, so I'll build my cogs over in that direction, and then we can sort of vote together to get the right prestige building there. And then we're both going to score off that. Or
you could go the different way and be quite negative to that person if you've
got no chance, because you'll know, like what you've done earlier would have decided whether you can exploit the fact weapons are there or not.
Yeah.
And then you get into where the voting is really important. And the first game or two, it kind of feels throwaway. And you go, I don't care what prestige building. I don't have a clue, mate. That is the game. The game is the voting. What prestige buildings are available and where they're placed is where the points are going to be scored, the big points. It's kind of crazy. It's such a niche product, which I'm sure he had in development before he became a mainstream publisher. He had a massive spotlight shining on this game.
We said that at the time.
Yeah,
he's put the Gloomhaven sort of theme onto it because Gloomhaven's done so well, and it's a very clever marketing strategy to add that name. Even though he's gone to great lengths to say that this isn't Gloomhaven, it's nothing to do. It's just set in the world, but it's a very clever thing to do. And he's obviously had this in the back of his head, and he's been. I'd say it is fully realised, but almost too well realised, and he just needs scaling back a little bit.
I think he may have done himself more damage than good by putting Gloomhaven on there, because it would have got a lot of exposure, and there's no way this game was ever going to have mass appeal, and I don't think it was designed to. And his follow-up with the Gloomhaven name on, even if it was nothing to do with dungeon crawling and a campaign and card management and all the rest of it, I think had to have more mass appeal than this. Because now people, the next time he releases a game, are going to be like, if he calls it, I don't know, Kings of Gloomhaven or whatever, people, I don't know, because Founders is really good for what it is, but it's not for the 100,000 people that have bought Gloomhaven.
It's a very, very, very clever game, but almost too clever.
Yeah, well, for us anyway. I do have to have one last moan before you go into your sum up.
Go on, mate.
If you play with fewer than 4 players, you have neutral resources. And I said that it's hard to motivate yourself to build initially and spend all your money when you score a point and another person scores a point. When you have neutral resources, it's -1 point. So actually, if you've got to build something with a neutral resource, you end up with 0 points for your effort sometimes. And that can go into tier 2. You build a tier 2 building and you're getting 0 VP. And you're like, why? But if you don't build them, we can't build the tier 3s and we can never complete the prestige. So therefore, you're building just to finish the game when there are fewer than 4 players in the game. The neutral resources rule is awful. Never mind niche, barrier to entry, bit hard to grok. Bad. That's the one thing that's just bad. Anyway, that was my little rant. I've been negative all through, Sean, but I hope I haven't come across too negative. What are your thoughts?
So to sum up on Founders of Gloomhaven, my personal arc in this game went from confusion to enlightenment to confusion to enlightenment, and I seem to be bouncing back and forth all the time. I don't think it's a particularly thematic game, but what it is, it's a clever game. It can maybe from the cluttered mind of a genius. Is it too clever? Yeah, sometimes. Do I want to explore it? Yes, because of what I said about the interaction. I find every turn to be fascinating. But very rarely is there an actual physical problem with the game. And I think in this game you do have it. I think it's very difficult to see, to follow the chains back, to see who's interacted with what, to see how they interact or who scores the points for every point scoring. You're going to make so many mistakes in this game that are going to change the way the game ends up. So it's a tough one to get to the table, Ronan. It's such a hard game to get to the table. I would like to get it to the table. I'd like to get it a few more times to try and get my head around it. But I'm worried that I'm not going to be able to. And even if I'm trying to do it, I'm worried that I'm not going to find the audience to do it with me.
Yeah, I'll never get the most out of it. Never. It's a spatial puzzle, slow burner. You have to help each other out, you think, but you're not really. You must plan, but it's incredibly hard to plan. It's not really designed for human minds. I don't know what mind is designed for, but not really. Not the 98% of the population it isn't anyway. But I tell you what it is. It's going to be fantastic for certain play groups. It's going to be a favourite because it's going to reward patience. It's almost like an old-fashioned game where they were being released 20 a year, and you got it and you played it and you played it and you played it till everyone knew it, and everyone knew what the name of the prestige buildings were, and everyone knew that when you build a certain resource you might be going up a certain chain. When you get to that level with it, I think it could be absolutely magnificent. I just think that an awful lot of game groups aren't going to get there. So it's a real mixed bag, fans of Gloomhaven. But there you go. That's our review of it. It may sound like it's incredible to you. It may sound like the worst game in the world. It can be either of those extremes, I think, to different people.
Cool. So we're going to finish off with Altiplano. And this comes from Rainer Stockhausen, who is the designer from Orleans. And this is very much the successor to Orleans. It's from DLP Games, and Renegade have also picked it up. It is a bag building game, and it's set in the South American highlands of the Andes, where essentially the altitude makes it really tough to survive and to thrive. The people of the local area have got to find food, produce it, and sell it to survive. On the table, you've got 7 location tiles. There's no board in this game. You have a farm, a mine, a forest, a harbour, a road, a village, and a market. And these things pretty much do what they say. Like, the forest is obviously going to produce wood, and the harbour, fish, the mountains, and the mine area is ore, etc. The players are also going to have a player board with action spaces that are directly linked to the 7 locations. They're also going to have a warehouse, the bag for the aforementioned the bag building, and they're also going to have a container which wasn't present in Orleans, and it changes the way you play slightly, as in when you use your tokens, they're going to go into this little container rather than back into the bag, so you cycle through all of your tokens that you've got in there. So on a turn, you're going to move your meeple to the area that you wish to activate on the locations, and then you're going to perform an action there. Now the actions are gathering goods, combining goods for other commodities. You can obtain add-ons to your tableau, like personal actions. You can take and fulfill orders. You can add produce to your warehouse, and you can add wagons, and the wagons allow you more movement around. This is all done by assigning the tiles that you draw from your bag, like Orleans. Points in the game are going to be given for fulfilling those contracts I mentioned. Building up your warehouse, you build them up in lines, and when you complete a line, you're going to score for it. You also have houses that you can obtain, and they give you end of game scoring, and certain goods are going to score. Now, Ronan, I think it's no shock or surprise that I was a huge fan of Orleans, and I was very excited about this one.
Do you listen to Dukes of Dice?
I have them on my download list. I don't think I've listened to them yet.
They got a thing where Baseball Highlights 2045 is definitely Alex's favourite game. I know Sean doesn't like it quite as much, but he likes it as well. And every episode, they talk about Baseball Highlights. They go, Baseball Highlights 2045. First mention for the episode. Second mention, third mention, fourth mention.
Does that mean mentioning? Oh, come on, I had to mention Orleans on this one.
Yeah, well, why choose this one to review? So you can mention Orleans. I presume that as soon as we get to our first treasure hunt, you're going to be picking the expansion out for this. Just so you can mention Orleans.
Probably.
Right. Altiplano, Sean.
Yeah.
It didn't lead me down a garden path, because that would be too short and open. It led me down a mountain path, which was quickly down to the bottom of a canyon with steep walls.
Are you giving the gold away already?
Only one direction to go in, and didn't allow me to deviate or see any of the marvellous scenery that was around me. And then I soon discovered that all my other players were going down a separate, different canyon path where they couldn't see the rest of the game. And then I was like, hold on. There are ways to jump from path to path here. I can buy a boat, or I can pay for one of these extensions. And miraculously, my path will change into a separate, yet very similar canyon path, leading me down a single path with no chance to change or deviate from course.
Right, shall we start to talk about the individual parts of that? Right, so let's start on the first path. The game kind of sets up your first path for you, doesn't it? It kind of tells you, right, this is what you're quite good at, and these are the resources that you can get at, and this is the way we are channeling you. Now,
you're a fisherman. You start in the harbour. The things that you have will allow you to make a certain thing, and it's punishing for you to attempt to move off that harbour.
Yes. Now, there are ways, as Ronan alluded to, of picking up a tile, much like Orleans. Here you go.
Extension,
6,
yeah.
is that 6, 7?
Okay.
Where you can have your own personal action space, and there are very similar tiles to that you can bring into a tableau that allow you to get access to some of the other commodities in the game. But it's more luck than judgment, isn't it? Like, you may get
it's more
access to the alpacas.
More to me, why would you? That's I'm not incentivized. In order to change up what I'm doing, tell me if you think I'm wrong. The only reason I actually do this is that there are those contracts available which say you have one of these, one of these, one of those. And if I want to do contracts, I then may want access to a variety of resources. All right. But
Contracts will score you the most points, generally, unless you build up your
will
warehouse.
they, or will warehousing the same thing again and again and again and buying the house for that thing?
I feel like this is something that you've explored. Would you like to talk us through it?
So, with the warehouse, you put a good in there, you fill up a row, it scores you a certain number of points. But the goods in the warehouse are still going to score a certain number of points. So let's say, for example, you're an alpaca farm. So at your alpaca farm, you use alpacas and you can make food and you can make cloth, and then wool rather, and then from the wool you can make cloth, which is quite high value. There's not, apart from going to the roads, because you go to the road and you can expand the number of discs you can put down at once. There's not too many reasons to diversify too far away from that. You might want some stone wherever to build a house, but so what you can just do is just churn. Just churn and churn and churn and churn and churn, and make loads of wool and make loads of cloth, right? And just have that in your system. Then warehouse it, and then make the same thing. And warehouse, so you're just adding to your deck and removing the same thing, and warehousing that good. So you just have row upon row upon row of wool or cloth. Then there are houses available which you can build, which makes every single one of those tokens +1. Now, I made 15 cloth, and they're all worth 3 or 4 points each, and then I make them worth whatever is 4 or 5 points each. That is the best way to score points. It completely incentivizes a mono economy. Now, all right, not completely. Don't shout at me, you need a bit of food to move around here and there, to go on the road a bit. You might want to jump in and grab the odd contract that suits you. It's not a lot. And there's a straitjacket put on making movement more difficult, which to me didn't add any fun to the game. And then there's set paths whereby each of the basic resources is not very flexible. In Orleans, and we have to talk about it, if I have a certain type, like I've got a monk or I've got a knight or whatever it might be, there are a few options or a few different combinations I can use to use those. I can put them there, this time I'll use it to do that, or this time I'll use it in conjunction with that one to do that. Here, no, mostly I use fish at the harbour to get stone, whatever that is, or by my extension, or I use my alpaca and a food to get wool, and that's what I get. There's no flexibility.
I think you've probably more intelligently gone into your games of this and devised that. I wasn't intelligent enough to do it, so I tried to diversify. That's what I tend to do. I feel like it's an economy game, so I try to build up my economy by bringing as much into me as possible. So I tried to diversify, and I felt it was a more enjoyable game by doing that, but I can see what you're saying, that why would you? If you're playing to win, and that's the way to win, then why would you? As I said, I wasn't intelligent enough to try that.
Well, it's not intelligence. It's not necessarily. It's that maybe you just didn't want to because it was boring, and it was boring. I had more fun when I went around the place and got different stuff, and I had more fun when I was looking for extensions, and I was like, I've had enough of making fish. I'm going to grab an extension, and I'm going to start making ore and see what I can do with that. In the end, it didn't make any difference to me. Really, I could make fish for a quarter of the game, fill up some levels of the warehouse, then move on and make ore and convert it and make jewellery or whatever, and then fill up warehouse from there. That's still scoring me points. But I'm still doing one thing for a series of turns. There's no excitement, there's no interest, there's nothing driving me. It's just a churn. Even if I want to change direction, it's much better to warehouse everything as I go, have a little set of tokens, and then, all right, I'll change my mind down, I'll go and do that. Because then it's a small set of tokens that's going to go through very quickly, and I can change what I'm doing very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I can see a lot of that. I think during the game, I felt like there were points where I was having a little bit of fun just playing the game, but not really thinking of the end game. But one thing I really didn't enjoy, even just within the game itself, was the lack of interaction.
Yeah.
Another mention of Orleans. In Orleans, you've got the map where you're moving around and you're looking to get to things before each other, and you're looking to gather the resources before each other, and you can block each other off because only one of you can go in. And you've also the track at the bottom. You're rewarded for getting to things first, and on top of that, can empty out the resources and before people can get at it. So you
can empty resources now to Altiplano, but it's quite end game.
Yeah,
and it doesn't make too much difference to you. You might get stuck with a contract you can't fulfill, because there's a lot of ways to mitigate and get. You can buy a boat to get a token which can start an economy in a certain direction. You can buy an extension to start.
I just didn't feel like it had any interaction at all.
No, and in fact, playing it, you played Orleans way more than I have. It made me question Orleans, because I remembered liking Orleans, and then I played Altiplano and went, did I like Orleans? Or was it like, because I had a really good mate of mine I don't play games with very often, taught me, and Rachel was there, we had a lovely time, and I thought maybe it was just a good time. So we played it together again, didn't we, after we played Altiplano?
We did, yes, yeah.
And I was like, no, this game's really good.
Wow. Giving the gold away, it's a much stronger game in my opinion.
It's really good. And do you know what? I think Altiplano gets knocked down one notch out of 10 for making me doubt Orleans. It's like, how dare you?
How very dare you?
What are you playing at? You're making me think the original game was the original game is strong, man. What have you done here? Should we just sum up? Because we just...
Yeah, go on. Sum up.
Altiplano is not terrible. It is dull, though. And when you start getting your economy and your engine churning, okay, cool, that's cool. I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll do this. But you almost have complete control over it. And people can't really mess with you much. And then you can decide how dull you want to be from there. And the duller you are, the more points you're going to score. The thing is, it doesn't exist in isolation. Orleans exists. And as the sequel to Orleans, it just feels like a step backwards. And it doesn't really matter what role you get at the beginning. It just means that you're going to be concentrating on a slightly different churn system. You're going to be walking down a different path through canyons where you can't see anything around you. And if you choose to shift midway through, that doesn't really make too much difference either. Because you'll just get your economy purring again, and you're getting tokens, and you put them in your warehouse, and that's that. It is just a pointless game. It doesn't add anything to the lexicon of games that Orleans doesn't already. So it's okay. It's a bit dull.
Yeah, actually, I touched on some of that in my Summit Ronan. Altiplano, it's okay. But it's not as tight, gritty, interactive as Orleans. I think you're very much on rails in this game. You start off on rails, and then you might hit a set of points where you can cross rails and go onto a new set of track.
Don't mention cross rail. That's too controversial after the announcement recently.
But again, you're on rails again. There are some nice touches. I mentioned the actual putting your pieces out of the bag into a container, so you cycle through everything. So the bag, you have to be more careful about your bag building. But I think that was the only thing I would add. I think the rest of it felt like the ideas that didn't quite make Orleans, and they thought, you know what, it's a worse game for these, and they've just kind of gathered those up and made Altiplano. It's fine, but Orleans exists. It's there. I think it's a far superior game, and they're too similar to make you choose Altiplano above it. And that was our review of Altiplano, and we will catch you after this brief interlude for our outro.
Sean, I'm going to subtitle this episode Slim Pickings.
I can't disagree with you. Yeah, we're thinking about our top threes, weren't we? And I was looking at it thinking, you know what? It's not a great haul. There's some interesting games, but yeah, not the best bunch we've ever done.
There were two that were nowhere near. There were two that I think could make a top three of some certain episodes. So I think my top two I'm quite happy with, and then the middle two both had issues. So overall, it's not the best top three, but I think my top two I'm quite happy with. I think those are decent games, and I would recommend them.
Yeah, okay, so shall I lead off with my number three?
Yeah, why not?
My number three is Founders of Gloomhaven. It could be brilliant in the right hands, in the right group, but I haven't quite got my head around it yet. But I can see the brilliance somewhere amongst the madness.
My number three is Founders of Gloomhaven.
Oh.
I told you before we start recording this segment, I think we've got the same top three. I'm pretty sure we've got the same top two. It's what order they're going to be in. And people can probably guess if they've been paying attention, all seven of them. Founders of Gloomhaven, the reason that I'm saying it's not the best top three is because some people are going to hate it. Some few people are going to absolutely adore it. And a lot of people are going to dismiss it after an attempt at a play. And certainly with the rule book being difficult. I could see what he was going for. He just didn't quite turn that into the user experience that I think we hoped for. So my number three, Founders of Gloomhaven.
Okay, so my number two is Sailing Toward Osiris. Lovely production. Does what it sets out to do, I think, in that it's a very much a gateway game. It's teaching new mechanisms to players who maybe not the most experienced, but still, for those first 4 or 5 games for sure, an interesting and clever and enjoyable game to me.
For my number two, I can only echo my learned friend.
Are you choosing Altiplano?
You dumbass. You said everything I wanted to say about Sailing Towards Osiris. Really nice production. Actually, maybe I'm less tolerant of it than you are in terms of actual plays. Like I'll happily play it to an end with someone who's getting in, and I'll happily teach it, and I'll be happy to play it in those circumstances with a bunch of gamers. I can't see myself ever choosing it, but it is an absolutely solid game, a solid production.
Well, then that means, I think everyone knows, because it was certainly the most glowing review we gave. My number one was Carthago, Merchants and Guilds. It was just way more than I thought it was going to be. It kind of surprised me at how good it was, and thoroughly enjoyed the choices that I had to make, and then that frustration of not being able to do everything I wanted to do. And
Yeah, absolutely. Carthago is my number one as well, which makes our 1, 2, 3 of the episode really easy to work out. We don't have to do our maths for that, do we? This could have made the top 3 in any episode. So whatever we just said, this would have been a contender, and this is the greatest Big Over the Bones ever. I think it's a really good game. It's a game that's gone into my recently culled down collection. It's on my to keep shelf, and there's not that many left on there, let me tell you, which suggests to me that it's very strong. I can see myself coming back to it. It's cool to teach. It's a game that dawns on people as they play it. I've been asked for repeated plays of it. It's going to stick around, and I hope that Carthago Merchants and Guilds will be sort of a sleeper hit, because I kind of crawled out of Essen last year. It's been picked up by Capstone Games. More people are talking about it, and I hope it continues to build this momentum, because it is a strong game, and it does deserve a wider audience, Sean.
Let's just touch on your game culling. You got rid of some bad boys in that I never thought I'd see you part with. Kemet went out the door.
Kemet or Cyclades had to be Cyclades.
Oh, so is that the way it went? You picked 2 or 3 similar games, and you picked the favourite of them.
No. I looked at games so I've got rid of 120, 130 games or something like that. I would never choose to play Kemet ahead of Cyclades. And I know they're not exactly the same game. Kemet is much more of a Euro and a planner and a combo. But I just looked at games and went, would I choose to play that ahead of the other games I have in that area? Like, let me think what else I've kept that's vaguely similar. There's probably not that many. Clash of Cultures I kept. I'd say I was in that area.
That's been a long time favourite of yours, though.
Yeah, we've still got Chaos in the Old World, which I really like, but Rachel absolutely adores. This could be an episode, couldn't it? What stuff I kept in certain genres? I can't see the whole. I kept War of the Ring, and I know they're not exactly the same game, but when you're coming to that sort of length of game time with that player count, and you're looking for fighting over a map, I'm not going to choose it. I had to keep Titans of the Underdark. Eleanor loves it. There's got to be enough in that genre, right? Yeah, I mean, look, mate, some of those that went out that are top 100 games, but just not getting played. And I kept certain things that maybe I wouldn't rate as highly because they get played in certain circumstances, or one of the family loves them, or whatever it might be. I don't know. Like, I was going to give you a spoiler for a review we're going to do. All right, say anything. Anyway, the house was getting overrun. The thing is, I think we said it before, and we're in the incredibly fortunate position that the pit stops have taken off, and it's getting more and more interest. We're getting more subscribers, more views, more publishers are interested, and especially coming up to Essen, the publishers are really interested in us doing pit stops. So they've started already, Essen preview games.
When Ronan goes loopy, absolutely loopy. Every year he goes, we can't do that many again, and then he doubles it.
I know, but it's fine. It's fine. I've got a plan this time.
You've also made a rod for my back.
Why? How's it for your back?
Obviously, Natalie's looking at you getting rid of all your games. What do you think she's saying to me? Why can't you do that?
Mate, why can't you do it? In fairness, you've got a lot of games you never play.
It's supposed to be on my side.
Yeah, he's got a garage that his car doesn't go in. It's just full of games that he never plays.
What? I went out there the other day. I was looking for a specific game that we were going to play. Wendake.
Yeah.
That will be coming soon.
Coming in episode 115, a quick review, I believe.
And I went out there and found 3 or 4 games that I'd forgotten I'd bought at the UKGE.
What were they?
They were... what were they? They were the Gilded Compass or something. One of them was called.
That's got a famous designer, isn't it?
Yeah, I've been looking at it and thinking it's not really got a lot of buzz, but it sounds interesting. A Curse of the Black Dice. We treasure hunted it a long time ago, and it was
trapped that a long time
ago. You
ago.
trapped that bad boy, but I thought again, like Loot Island, I found it really cheap in the bring and buy, so I thought I picked it up. And there was something else I grabbed as well while I was there, and it's quite embarrassing. You go out there and I was like, I didn't actually know I had that.
Okay. You do need to get rid of some games. That's what I'm saying. I'm talking from the moral high point.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, enough of our just talking rubbish. Our next episode that we've planned, and as you well know, who knows if this is going to happen or not, but hopefully in episode 115, coming relatively shortly, we're going to be joined by Puria, and we're going to do, we hope, 9 quick reviews in the first half, and in the second half, we're going to be looking at the 2 brasses. Them being Lancashire and Birmingham. We've got different amounts of history with the original, with Brass Lancashire. And then, so we're going to discuss that. We're going to discuss, obviously, I mean, what do we need to say? The new version looks amazing, but any changes? And then more specifically about Brass Birmingham, with regards to the changes they've made there, the good, the bad, was it necessary? Which one are we going to keep? Are we going to keep both? Are we going to keep none of them? Because all 3 of us have backed it, and all 3 of us have been playing both versions. So we're going to pick those apart for a little while, and 9 quick reviews, and we hope that will be a decent episode. And it'll be lovely to have Puria back. And that's about it, Sean.
Yeah, and then hopefully we'll be kicking into Essen madness.
We might have a special guest or 2 in our Essen previews, but we're not going to talk about that just yet because we haven't recorded them. So we won't talk about it until we've actually done it. And we're going to be doing treasure hunts from the beginning of October onwards. And we know that people enjoy those. And as I said, pit stops have already started for Essen releases. So head to YouTube and subscribe, and you might get some heads up on some games coming out in October.
Very good. Right, shall we let these good people go?
I think we should.
As always, we are very proud members of the Dice Tower Network. Go to the Dice Tower and the network for gaming goodness galore. If you wish to download our episodes, we're on Podbean, Stitcher, iTunes and Spotify. We're on social media. We have a Facebook page. We have a Twitter handle @Gamepit Podcast, and we're also on Instagram. Ways to contact us are through our email address. We are the gamepitpodcast@gmail.com, and a great place to contact us is on our Board Game Geek Guild. Pop along there and we'll be happy to chat with you then. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Music by E. Aaron.
Diva Babo.